Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. My name is Omolabake Olagunjo. For the benefit of those that have not met me before, or for those who are joining the session for the first time, my name is Omolabake Olagunjo. I'm a senior program associate with the Creative Economy Practice at CC Hub. You're welcome to the online Fashionomics Accelerator program, and today we'll be covering high quality product manufacturing and fashion in fashion. Kindly note that translations are available in English, French, Portuguese, and Arabic. We request that you look for the round interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen to select your preferred language. Today's session is 1 hour, 30 minutes, and we're going to be talking pattern quality, garment accessories quality, garment construction. While you wait, please turn on your cameras if you can, and share in the chat what you are looking to get out of the session. I present to you our amiable and amazing facilitator for today, Anne Macreed. Anne Macreed is an award-winning fashion designer with over 2 decades of experience in sustainable fashion and development in Africa, as well as earlier years in Europe. Anne Macreed is the founder of Kenyan-based unisex label Kiko Romeo, where she has spent 25 years building it into one of the most innovative fashion brands on the African continent. She's an expert who is widely recognized as a pioneer in the East African fashion industry, a multilingual connector, inspirational leader, teacher, healer, and creative thinker. She's passionate about using fashion to create good jobs and build understanding between communities and across social classes. Without further ado, I present to you our facilitator for today, Anne Macreed. Hi, Anne, so nice to see you today.
Hi, it's wonderful to be back and very exciting to see a new cohort on this program. I always get excited when I see all the names and countries from around Africa. I didn't say bonjour à tout le monde.
Apologies, I guess Anne is having network issues. Wanji, could please kindly help out with her network issues. She'll be back shortly, please.
And my view of high quality, your view of high quality may be different. But nowadays, we're selling in a global market, and there are certain minimum standards we need to meet for us to be taken seriously as designers. So in our local market, already you know that if your quality is not good enough, your customers are going to return it or refuse to pay for it and so on. In international market, if they receive goods that are not of a certain standard, immediately they just send it back, refuse to pay, probably make you pay for the shipping, so they just keep it until you organize it. And that is not a scenario we want. They, by regulations in many developed markets, are not allowed to hang things of poor quality. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that I like you to think about and see, are you already there or can you improve? In my opinion, every business that I know of, including my own, we can improve. There's always something that could be a bit better. So we try to go little by little, make it the best we can. And what I've also learned is that sometimes people forget, our workers forget. So if you're not constantly retraining, then the chances are they may slide back into bad habits that as the designer, you don't want representing your brand. Am I right? Can I have a show of hands of how many people feel that's a true comment? Yeah, you can always use the reaction button at the bottom also. There's 3 dots, or you may just see the smiley face and you can give your reactions. But yes, so for all of us, it seems to be a bit of a problem. So let's see, because if you as the boss are aware of 1, the kind of problems, and 2, how to fix them, it's easier for you to train your team, and it's also easier for you to monitor your team. And they know you know what you want. So we are the ones that are in charge of making sure that the thing that reaches the customer represents our brand very, very well, because our brand name is everything. And we don't want a label and then threads hanging everywhere and it looks bad. We need to make sure our product represents our brand very well. So let me start by sharing the screen. And I'm going to take it in bits. We won't go through everything in one go. We will do a section, and then after that section, we'll now do a Q&A if anyone's got any questions. The questions you can also put as I'm talking, you can put them in the chat box. And then at a certain point, I'll stop and we'll answer them. So what are you looking at when you're calling something high quality? So for me, I'm looking at the cut of the garment. I say the cut before the stitching, because if a garment is very well stitched, but it isn't cut well, it doesn't fit the body well, then it doesn't matter if it's very well stitched, it doesn't look good. So for me, number 1 is the cut. And then, of course, sometimes it's a fitted style, sometimes it's free flowing, but there are certain things that have to be cut even when free flowing, that it flows where you want it to flow and it doesn't where you don't. So that is the cut. Then we have the fabric. How well is the fabric woven, knitted, printed, dyed? Is the fabric looking good? The accessories. So you may have a beautiful item, but the zip is bad quality or the buttons look really horrible. You've made your product go from a high quality to a low quality, just with its little button, wherever it is, it makes all the difference. I'm seeing someone with their hand up. If you have questions for now, please put them in the chat box. Thank you. Then the construction, how is it put together? Now you can stitch by machine, you can stitch by hand, both are fine, hand takes long, but the quality of how you stitch is the important thing. And then also, have you clipped inside when you cut the seam and it's curving, have you clipped it so that when you turn it, it lies flat? Have you put the canvas on for the collar or whichever other part of the garment? And is it flat or is it beginning to bump? And then finishing, like how has it been finished on the inside? Are there still threads? Are there places where you need to put a hand stitch for it to stay flat? All of that counts. And then the presentation. How have you ironed it? How have you folded it? And how have you labeled it? All of these are points that make us feel a garment is high quality or low quality or somewhere in the middle. So let's start. First of all, you and your brand. So we all have our customers, and our customers expect something from us. And they chose us for certain reasons. What they don't want to do is come in today and find something that's beautifully finished and come in tomorrow and it's a mess. They look for consistency. They go to you or to me because they know what they're getting and they want it. As soon as your quality is inconsistent, you will start to lose clients because they get tired of not knowing if they can rely on you or not. This happens if you're making things to order, like in tailoring, and also if they're hanging on the shelf in your shop. The customer wants consistency. Your brand has a value, and the value is translated in the clothing. For tailoring, that's when you're making to measure. They may have chosen you on a recommendation of a friend or so on, but you may be taking them your fabric, but you still are expecting a certain standard as a customer. You want to know that it's been cut well, stitched well, they haven't messed up your fabric, as they say, and that the service, like how are you treating them? Are you being kind? Are you being efficient? Are you being rude? Like, people want to know that they want to know what to expect. That's why they go. And then for a wholesale and a retail business, so maybe you've done a collection and you're making 5 pieces for here or 20 pieces for there or 50 or even bigger if you're lucky. The wholesaler, the person who's going to sell this to the public, doesn't want to find 1 or 2 that are made like this and 5 that are made like that. They want consistency. So if you have a workshop, or if you are taking it to a group of tailors or individual tailors, they have to make it the same way. You can't have this tailor has made the seam like 1 inch and that one's done a 1/2 inch and this one has finished the edge with blue thread on the overlock and that one's used red. No, we need consistency. It needs to look the same because you want to avoid returns. Returns cost you money. So we'll start with the pattern. That relates to the cut. Remember I said for me that's number 1. So why you use a pattern is because you can repeat it. So if you get the pattern right and you've tried it and the sample is fitting well, it allows you to make more exactly the same. And either you or someone else can grade it into different sizes. That means you have a mathematical increment for each size, which is now distributed all the way around the body, which makes it a smaller size or a bigger size. And if you have these patterns well done and well organized, it's easy to find for a production repeat. You can also adapt them easily into a similar style. Maybe you have a basic dress and all you're doing is changing the neckline or changing the sleeve or maybe making a slightly different shape on the skirt, something like that. So when I say to keep your patterns well organized, what I do is each pattern has a number. Some people prefer names, you can do either. And then I hang them. So if I'm hanging them, I would hang for names, I would hang in alphabetical order. If it's numbers, I hang like 0 to 10 on one hook, 11 to 19 on the next, and so on. And I put them in order so I can quickly find them. And on top of that, I have a drawing or a photo of the style, and I have the pattern number or the pattern name. So whoever is in the workshop can quickly find that pattern and use it again. It saves time and it adds to the quality because it's consistent. And it also means that even on the inside of the garment, for example, the facings that finish the edge of the garment are now exactly the same. So when someone turns it inside out, it's still a work of art. It looks great on the outside, it looks great on the inside. So things that I consider important for it to be considered a good pattern. First of all, it has to reflect the intention of a designer. So if you're the designer or you're hiring the design is being made based on the creative idea, what it's meant to look like on the body. So the pattern cutter has to make whatever they make, the pattern must create that look. So a good pattern for me reflects the designer's intention. Then all the pieces have to fit together. Now, if one side is too long and the other side is too short, like so they don't match, imagine on a side seam. I'm almost certain that one tailor will take the extra away from the sleeve and another will take the extra away from the bottom. And there you have a thing with a problem because the garment is not consistent. This one has been pulled that way and the other one has been pulled the other way. So a good pattern, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. It fits together exactly. Then, as I mentioned, on the inside of the garment, the facings. Facings should flow. They shouldn't be the pattern cutter makes the outside and then just gives it to the tailor to just freehand cut the facing. No, because each tailor is going to cut it differently. And some tailors are not going to measure. So when it gets to the side seam, this bit, one side is going to be bigger than the other. And they're not going to care. They're going to say it's a facing. So let me just sew it anyway. Now, when you come to turn your garment inside out, it looks ugly. And remember, we want the consumer to feel, wow, this is so beautifully made. It's going to be fabulous. So before they even put it on, they have in their head, this is wonderful. That is what you want to create each and every time. That is what we call high quality. So unless something is a deliberate part of the design, let me go back to the side seam. In some cases, your design may be longer at the back and shorter at the front. The side seams don't match. But where they're meant to join, you put a little thing we call a notch. You cut out a small mark so that the person stitching knows that that's exactly where the piece is meant to join. That way you don't have this trimming from here, trimming from there and making a mess. Let me find the next one. So that was on the patterns. I don't know if we have any questions on patterns so far. I see lots of things in French and I see some people I know. Welcome. It's always nice to see people I've mentored come back on other courses because let's face it, all of these incubators start, they help us, it's fantastic, but we always need refreshers. And I'm always delighted to see the interest level, so people keep going. Right, I don't see any questions on patterns. Just please understand that for me, they're the starting point of anything that's being considered quality. It's really important that you spend the time for that. So I'm getting a few more things here. So let's talk about the fiber. I'm going to start in reverse with this. So a lot of people may call their products silk, but silk currently is being used as marketing terminology for a lot of fabrics that are polyester. Now, when you speak in English, you can use the word silky with a Y at the end, and silky means it feels like silk. It's soft and flowing. I'm writing the word silky. So silky is something that feels smooth and originally feels like silk. But it doesn't mean the fiber is silk. There may also be manufacturers of polyester fabrics that use, they call it China silk, is an example of a lining fabric we find all across Africa. That fabric is 100% polyester, but they call it China silk because they want you and me to think it's high quality. So you need to know your fabrics because your fibers in the fabrics, because if you're now sending them into another market, into a developed market, if the label you put on your garment about the composition of the fiber is wrong, they remove it from the shelf. Now, you may think, how are they going to know? Well, some people know a lot about fabrics. Like if you give me a string of fabrics and fibers, I'll probably know 90% of them, I would say. At worst guess, 80. It depends a bit where you live. Some countries are very keen on fabric and fiber and have been for a long time. And other countries are more new to it. And so they're less good at it. Now, there are tests you can do to check the composition of your fabric. They usually involve burning the cloth. And from that burning, you're able to test and work out what it might be. It's pretty accurate. And I'll share after this talk, I'll share with the group a site or some kind of thing, a chart you can use to try and work it out. But don't knowingly label your clothing incorrectly. That will be a big problem. It also affects how you wash the garment. And seeing as we also sometimes send things to the dry cleaner, and the dry cleaner is also not always good, we really need to know these things. By the way, I've seen a few questions that I'll be answering in a bit after this section. So, knitted fabrics, what do you look out for in a knitted fabric? So they're usually knitted by machine, and then we cut them up maybe into a bodycon dress or something like that. So they're very stretchy. But when you buy the fabric, you can test it. You can check by stretching it. See, when you stretch it, is it going back immediately or is it going back slowly? If it's going back slowly, the chances are the quality of the stretch fiber is not very good. So knits stretch in different ways. A knitted fabric stretches just because it's knitted, because the technique of knitting allows some stretch. They can also stretch because of the fiber in the yarn. And that could be in the case of, let me say, a swimsuit. A swimsuit is a knitted fabric, also from a stretchy yarn, which allows you to stretch it both ways. So there's different things to look for here. You obviously want something that looks on the surface, it looks good. And if you're going to buy a lot of fabric, I usually recommend you buy a little first, you wash it and see how it behaves before you buy everything. Because maybe the fabric looks good, but it doesn't behave well with water. And then sometimes not with dry cleaning either. And dry cleaning in most of our markets is a luxury that some people can afford, but some people can't. So you need to know your brand and know, is it worth me using a fabric that requires special care? Or should I use a fabric that you can do this with and nothing happens? That is how a lot of people wash. So that is the importance. I'm just seeing an error. Yeah, so when you assemble knitted fabrics, you're not meant to stitch them with the normal needle you use, say, on jeans and denim. You're meant to use a ballpoint needle so that when the needle pierces the cloth, it doesn't damage the fiber. That's number one. We call them a ballpoint needle. I'm just going to put it in the chat box, just so that you know the name. There we go. And then the other thing is, sorry, let me just go up again. The other thing is that you have a special kind of machine. When you make a t-shirt, there's for the hemming, it's called a flatbed, and it does a special technique that allows the fabric to stretch and go back again. On the seams on the inside, normally they use a 4-thread overlocker. These things are important because if you sew knitwear with a normal straight stitch machine, as soon as someone wears it, you're going to get a lot of holes because the fabric is stretching, but the actual stitching and thread is not. So that creates a big problem for you and probably a lot of returns. Right, we go on to weave. So a woven fabric is like that, where the black, in this case, the black one we call the warp, and it's something that's put on the loom from one end to the other end, and sometimes it's rolled at one end, so you can do many more meters. It's set up in advance. And then the weft is the thing that goes across. So usually the warp is made by quite a strong fiber because it's pulled very tight. And this is true of hand loom as well as machine looms. both of them. And it doesn't matter if your loom is tiny and operated by one person, like these very narrow looms, or if it's a wide loom, it's the same, it's a warp. And then the weft can be done in all kinds of different fiber. So maybe your warp is cotton and your weft is also cotton, but maybe the weft is wool, maybe the weft is silk, maybe the weft is, I don't know, some kind of unusual fiber that you're getting in your locality and you're turning into a yarn. It can also be from upcycled things from secondhand market. You cut them into strips and you weave them. That is the weft. So most of you are more familiar. I don't want you to necessarily read all of this now. You can take a screenshot or a photo or whatever. But when you're looking at a fabric, you want to check how is it woven. So if the yarn, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment because it will get distracting. So if your yarn is machine spun, that means when they take the fiber, say the cotton fiber, and they wind it to make a yarn, if it's done by machine, it's usually very smooth. If it's done by hand, it will have bumps. Now, when we're talking high quality and international markets or just high quality in our local markets, something that's done by hand has an extra value. We have to pay more money for it because it takes time to do all of this by hand. And it's something that people can really appreciate because it's never exactly the same. So you're also recognizing the value in the uniqueness. So I use a lot of hand loom woven cloth. So when I'm looking at it, a machine one will all be very smooth. And if it has a bump in the pattern, it will be regular. It will repeat itself all the time. When it's hand loom woven, the bumps will happen in different places. So you choose that fabric as a designer, knowing that that is what it's going to look like, and you choose it because you love it, and you know it's going to add value to your garment. I hope I've got that one clear. Let me share again. Now, another thing is about the evenness. When you have hand loom weaving, sometimes, I think some of you know it from weaving and some of you know it from knitting. It depends who is doing the weaving, who is doing the knitting, whether it's tighter or looser. It doesn't really matter. It's just that in an extended piece of cloth, if you have this weaver doing it today, this weaver doing it tomorrow, and then another and another, if you look at the whole cloth, it may have differences. So are those differences okay for you? Or do you want it to be consistently the same person? We check that. Now, the density of cotton. So a lot of us across the African continent use printed fabrics. We call them different things, Ankara, Kitenge, there's so many names for them. The question in terms of quality is that we have locally produced, we have produced by our neighbors, we also have a lot coming in from China, sometimes Thailand, and so on. And sometimes to make more money, the manufacturers are cheating us a little bit in the quality of the cloth. So first of all, they may make the fabric a bit more narrow. So whereas before it was 45-inch, 120 centimeters, now it may be 43-inch or 42-inch. You find this out when you want to cut things together. So when you're buying your fabric, look out for that. And then the density of the threads. If you hold it to the light, you may see some that you thought were okay because they have some kind of fancy wax finish or something. When you hold it to the light, it's very thinly woven, which means that by the time you wash it and the wax goes off, unless you wax it again, you're going to see that it doesn't have the same kind of body. Let me go on to the next. Dyes. A lot of us do tie-dye, and sometimes we dye things all over. But what is the quality of the dyes you're using? Now, this is a very tricky one. I'm speaking from Kenya, and I know quite a bit about the East African market, but we have a lot of problem on dyes because the dye companies keep changing. The manufacturing technique and the color from their dyes changes, and sometimes they're not fast. When I say fast, I mean when you wash it, the color comes out. That is also about the dyeing technique. It's about how new is the dye. It's about what are the chemicals you're using with it, how new are they? Or if you're doing natural dyes, the same thing. What are you using to fix the dye, and is it working? Certain colors are more difficult. Red usually has a problem, but just beware, if you're now manufacturing with an idea of exporting and you haven't stocked up on dyes and kept them in the right temperature, you may start by making this and they're all fantastic. And then when you have to do more, the color comes out badly. It's a very difficult one because we're usually constrained by cash. So we don't want to buy a lot of stuff that we're not going to use. It's a balancing act. Otherwise, you have to sell limited edition because you know you can repeat some things, but not other things. And then when you check a cloth that's been dyed, is the dye distributed evenly, or are there errors in that also? And then let me bring you on to prints, and then we're going to answer a few questions. So prints, if you're making your own cloth or getting someone to do that, how is the print being repeated? What is it like in terms of the edge of the garments? So when you are cutting a garment, you want to try and make sure that, say, let me use the back seam as an example. You don't want, if my hand is the print, you don't want my hand higher on one side and lower on the other, and it's by accident. If your design is deliberately different, no problem. But very often, we find that the print has not been cut correctly. The person who has put the pattern on the fabric has not checked if the print is falling at the same place on the side seam or the back seam on both sides of the fabric. Also, a lot of the fabrics we're buying, which are maybe not good quality in printing, the fabric has somehow been printed a little bit diagonally. So when you fold the fabric, the print is not matching. Anyone had that problem? Just give me a reaction if you've had a problem where you fold the fabric and the print is not the same. So you're cutting it, thinking it's in the same place, and then you open it and it's not. Okay, I'm not getting very many hands, but I would think it's a pretty common problem. So when you buy your print, that is when you need to take the time to actually check, has the fabric moved when they were printing it? You're buying a 6-yard piece, it's all bundled up, and it becomes complicated because the person selling doesn't want you to open everything. But in some cases you have to, because you're wasting your money if it's not working properly. How are you now going to do it? You can stretch the fabric a little bit, but that doesn't work on a big scale. It might work on one piece, but it doesn't work in general. And if you have to stretch it too much, the garment's going to hang badly when you cut it, because some bits are cut on the straight and some have been stretched. Then, the whole thing of matching colors, sorry, let me go back up there. So are the colors matching the outline of the design? And with the industrial printing, that's usually not a problem, but sometimes it can be. What I mean by that is you have maybe a 2 or 3 color print. And instead of printing one thing exactly on top of the other where it's meant to be to give an outline, things are misplaced. And maybe in some places they're okay, and some places they're not. That's showing a poor quality fabric. There is nothing wrong with hand printing. It's fantastic. I'm talking about when it's badly done. It's not intentional. It's not part of the design. Every time you've designed something specifically to be different, that's fine. I'm talking about when you're buying it, thinking it's meant to be the same all over, and it isn't. That's when it has a problem. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. And I'm going to answer some of your questions quickly. I saw something before asking me to explain again how I organize my patterns. So let me do that first. I always have either a photo or a drawing of the design. And then I give it a name. And sometimes, like, well, I always give a number, but some people don't. I like to have numbers. So when I do the pattern, it can have either the name or the number, right? If you like names, use names. If you like numbers, use numbers, no problem. So the pattern piece, all of the pattern pieces have the pattern name or number written on them. Then you join them together by size, and then you put all the sizes together and you hang them together as a style. Now, in my workshop, I have a rail and I have metal hooks, and I label my hooks. So if I was doing it according to name, this might be the hook of A, B, C, D, and I organize hook A, hook B, hook C, hook D. If I'm doing it with numbers, then this hook is 0 to 9, or I actually use it in numbers of 100. So it would be 009, or it would be, let's say 100. So it's 100 to 109. Then it's 110 to 119, 120 to 129, like that. And so if my pattern is number 104, I hang it on the hook that's labeled 100 to 109. If my pattern is 123, I hang it on the hook that's labeled 120 to 129. If we're talking names and the pattern begins with a B, I hang it on the hook that is for B, or I hang it on the hook that's for C, like that. So I'm just checking. I'm sorry, Angola. I'm glad they're making fabrics, but maybe as a group of designers, you could visit the textile factories and explain to them the problem you're having and see if they can try to improve. Now, I know that's not always easy. They're sometimes interested in the low market, but with time, everybody is going to be more demanding. So as a group of designers, you can go to these factories and you can try to pressure them. What are the advantages of these fibers depending on the climate? If you're interested in producing a large scale. So it's interesting about climate. I always prefer cotton, linen, such fabrics in a hotter climate, and something like wool, I would prefer in a cold climate. But things change according to the season. I'm sitting in Nairobi today, it's very hot and sunny. But if in 2 months' time or 3 months' time, it's going to be quite cold. Last year, I was wearing a puffer jacket from Scotland in my house in Nairobi because the houses don't always have heating. So everything is relative. If you're talking Addis Ababa, it gets very cold. South Africa and the north of Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, you have big climatic variations. And then you have all of the central area, Nigeria, Ghana, and so on, where there's not a big change. So it's up to you to look at your clients, try things out and see what they like. Remember that you can have a denser weave of a fine fiber that is still cool. So it also depends on how the yarn has been spun. And sorry, I'm having a look to see if there's anything else I've missed. I've seen about the Malian cotton. I love to hear when people are working with the weavers in different countries, because this is the richness of the continent. It's our heritage. And these are fabrics that, you know, it's fantastic if you're able to work with them. Equally speaking, a lot of people on the continent look for stretch fabrics now because they feel it gives them a better fit. So the space for everybody, it's about knowing your brand and knowing what works for you. Someone is asking about the type of thread that you use for sewing knitted garments. I'm not an expert on that. I'm sure in the case of swimwear, they do use a different type of thread. It's a lycra thread that stretches in all directions. But if you're using the 4-thread overlock and the flatbed machine for a t-shirt, for example, then in that case, the machine is already stitching in a way that makes it go backwards and forwards, which allows movement in the actual stitch. So generally speaking, no. I'm just checking if there's anything else that I need to answer. Yeah, and please, as regards China, there are all qualities of manufacturing. But sadly for us, what comes to Africa tends to be the lower quality production from China. So in some cases, it would be rejects, like they made for someone else, and then this hasn't worked out. In other cases, they're just making it cheaper, and they're not caring much on quality control because they know it's going to the African market. It's not always the case, but our own traders have also tended to buy based on price than on quality. And for us fashion designers, that can be a problem. Now, about repurposing patterns and discontinuing, I don't see why you don't, but at the same time, I started my business in '96. I have all of my patterns since then. And I, over the years, have gone back, picked out patterns, used them again. And my daughter has now been designing Kiko Romeo for the last 3 years. And she often goes back into the pattern database to get patterns she wants to now use, change, and or reinvent or whatever. Yes, another very important point. If you make something using a white fabric and then the color is running on your print fabric, you're in a problem. So personally, I test every fabric that we use before we cut it. So on a printed fabric, we test it first a little piece. I check on the water, is the dye coming out and so on. And if it is, the first thing we would do is to soak it in a bucket of water with a cup of vinegar. You can also use salt, but salt has to be dissolved properly, and vinegar also works. The vinegar that's acetic acid works. So put your fabric in there, soak it, but when I say a bucket, it's better to be a big one. And a warning, if the fabric belongs to your client, don't do that without their permission. I did that on a client's fabric, or my staff did, and the color ran, the red ran, and like she was furious. So don't, test it first, a little corner of the fabric, see what the problem is and so on. But don't make a mixed print and plain white garment or light color without checking. And remember that red is usually problematic. Now, looking after patterns, wear and tear, if you make them in paper, which I do, first of all, if you store them properly, they're less likely to get tears. But what I do is the first tear I see, I repair it with masking tape because otherwise it just gets bigger. And if you can make some kind of case, like or fabric covering or something that like goes over your pattern rack. I've got lots of racks and I hang them on a rack. Put something over that so it's protected from people walking by quickly. And don't leave them in a busy place. Put them to the side where people are not going to brush against them. Guidelines on buying fabrics and trims online. I'm sorry, I don't have. Maybe within your group, you can exchange experiences and maybe Fashionomics can set up something. I don't know about, oh yeah, someone is saying the course will be translated into Portuguese. Luckily I read Portuguese, but my spoken Portuguese is very rusty. So if your cloth is made, you said handmade machine loom. There's a certain, when I'm talking about a machine loom, that would be if you go to the likes of Vlisco or GTP or, you know, these big fabric manufacturers where they have industrial machines. But if you are talking about like looms set up in a workshop and there's a weaver, if there's a person sitting at the loom, that is considered to be hand woven or hand loom woven. How am I able to preserve the designs? If if you love your designs and you feel they're unique, why wouldn't you keep the pattern? But I do ready to wear, rather my daughter now does it. And that's why I keep the patterns, because the patterns are graded into different sizes. And that means I want to keep them because I know fashion goes around and around. And, you know, things that my daughter is designing now, I'll tell her, oh, I think I have a pattern for that. And I find it because back in the day, I maybe designed something similar. Yeah, and I'm seeing the thing about the fine needle for silk, that's correct. Feathers, yes. So those of us who are very experimental with our fabrics, it's a good idea to test first. As designers, we want to check, we want to find new things to do, but there may be an implication in how the customer looks after that garment, let alone us. Great to see all of this about digital printing. Okay, yeah, and the thing about the fabric not being rolled correctly, that's, yeah. So maybe you could suggest doing a class on this. This is now somebody from South Africa, Shara Mort. Maybe you could organize something because it's a big problem. And then we get on with that. And I'm just seeing if anyway, how best can you test the yarn for knitting? Well, I would start by actually pulling it apart with my hands, like how strong is it? Now, if it breaks nearly immediately, it might be that the yarn is old, or it might be that it's not spun properly, or it might be that it's very delicate and you have to handle it delicately. So it could be any of the above. So you could just check. Right, we're going to have a short break because I always like breaks so you can think about things. We'll be back soon and we still have a lot to do. So I'll go through the next bit a bit faster. But for me, these are very important bottom line on how you achieve high quality. So that's why I take a bit longer with them. So I'm giving you a 5-minute break, and I mean 5 minutes. So please just put your cameras off, take a break, stand up, walk around, don't just sit at your desk and don't just sit on social media. Speak to you in 5 minutes. Thank you. was helpful. It's a lot of information to take in a short time. So I always like to take a little pause. Yeah, so let me share my screen again. I think most of the questions have been answered. And what I'm doing is I can read the French and Portuguese, as I said, but I do have to reply in English. So you'll bear with me on that one. Right, you've got a beautiful fabric, you know the fiber, it's nicely knitted, it's nicely woven, you have your pattern ready to stitch. So, garment accessories. I don't know where to go here because there's something we have such a problem with. Let me start there, zips. And I think whatever we're experiencing here is being experienced in most places across at least the central belt of Africa. We're in that boat. And all I can say is that try to find YKK zips. YKK zips are being manufactured, I think, in Swaziland, and I'm not sure where else. They may be expensive in your market, but the problem of stitching a beautiful garment and then the zip breaks. I mean, there is nothing worse. It totally damages your reputation, and the client may have a very embarrassing moment, like it's a wedding dress, it's an evening gown, they're on stage, the zip breaks. Like, we just cannot have that happen. And I've been in a situation a couple of times when our zips were just like not good enough. And so now we do whatever we can to pay the extra and find it. And if we travel to Europe or something, we try to buy zips when we're there. If you're buying in Dubai and so on, that's great, but make sure there's still YKK, because people can be very good salespeople and they'll tell you, oh, it's just like this. But is it really? Are you sure? And how are you going to know? I see someone with their hand up. I'm not sure if it's an urgent question or if they would like to, or someone saying SBS. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know SBS. Maybe they're fantastic, but I'm only saying YKK because they're kind of, from what I know, the global standard, but I'm sure they have very good competitors. Don't take a risk. Right, then we have the whole thing around ribbons. So you may be using on a high quality garment like a skirt or a dress that's maybe strappy and has a high collar or something. You may want to have a ribbon, which then when you put it on the hanger, it goes over the hanger and it makes the dress hang nicely. Again, what is the quality of the ribbon you're using? It's a bit exhausting for us, honestly speaking, because in a developed market, you would just have this shop that sells the high quality and that shop that sells the low quality. And according to your price point, you go here or you go there. In Africa, or at least my experience of most of Africa, is that it really is a struggle. And as designers, we become like policemen, where we're actually trying to find out, is this quality correct? Have they said it's true? And so on. Exchange information with your designer friends here, and designer friends in your own markets, because collectively you have bargaining power. And you can sometimes talk to the manufacturer or the retailer to bring up, better quality for you. Then buttons, crystals, beads. What material are they made of? Okay, crystals that I've seen, a lot of them, Swarovski's brought in a lot, but there are many others in the market. And yes, they look great. How do you need to look after them? And have you made that clear to the customer on the label? A customer may ask you, how do I wash this? And they go home and they forget. Or they leave it lying around the house and someone in the house picks it up and washes it. So it's important we brief our clients. And then how you put them onto the garment. There are special techniques. Research it on YouTube. That's the best place. And learn to do it really well so that they don't fall off. I put a note, if you're able to get, eventually make your own buttons, I mean, for me, that just adds so much value to the garment. A lot of the buttons we get are pretty poor quality. You wash them, the surface comes off. You dry clean them, they come off. You have to test everything before you buy in bulk. The thread, just when we thought, okay, we've covered everything, we have to look at thread. So in the Kenyan market right now, and that means the East Africa into Congo, because a lot of things come through our port, the thread we're getting is quite poor. There are some higher quality ones and they cost more money, but the ones that are generally available in every color, they are not good. If you look at the yarn, it will be smooth and then it will bump and then smooth and bump and so on. It's a mess. You put that on your machine, it breaks. It also sometimes causes tension problems because tension is adjusted for the thread, but then the quality of the thread going through it is changing from thick to thin and it's a mess. So thread generally, if you look at how many garments you can make from one big cone, it's usually 10,000 meters. And maybe this cone is costing $1 and that cone is costing $2 or $3. I don't know. Pay the extra money. Do not compromise the quality. I have some of these poorer quality threads, even the seams, they start getting holes because the thread breaks. And you put in all that beautiful work, as have your staff and your tailors, and then what they've made comes to pieces really quickly as soon as the garment, as someone wears it. No. When you buy it, try breaking it with your hands, and if it's really difficult to break, that's a higher quality thread. You don't want one that breaks easily. And then just to be on the safe side, when you're making a pair of pants, please double or triple stitch the bit between your legs, the crotch, and maybe the part of the thigh that's going to have more stress on it. It just makes it safer for the client who's buying. And then metal. You know, a lot of us like metal as designers, it looks cool. But when we wash with water and detergents or dry clean it, what's going to happen to the metal? Is it still going to look good? I know if it's been dipped in gold or silver, it still looks good. But not all of us are doing that. We're using aluminium, we're using brass, and just check because it may not be as good as it looks when you buy it. When we buy it, it looks shiny, shiny and beautiful. I'm just having a quick check on the chat box. Yes, this is sad. Oh yes, eyelets, which tend to rust. So eyelets in metal, often we can use them because we're designers and we like what they look like, but they also use them often on chef jackets under the arms. And particularly if the location is near the sea, then definitely there's a chance that the salt will erode them even faster. I'm so delighted to hear that Egypt has a good thread, and I would love you to tell them to please export into the rest of the African continent and maybe give us the contacts so we can start communicating with them. I'm sorry, I'm seeing a lot of you have a problem with this. Yes, this is really not good. Someone also mentioned the quality of the label. I'll just mention that shortly. Yeah. Okay. Yes, now when you were saying that not only in Africa, like Zara and other brands maybe not having high quality stuff, you have to remember that Zara in Africa is considered to be high quality. And some things about Zara are high quality. They have good designs, often taken from other people, sometimes not. And they usually have very good patterns that fit well. And some of their fabrics are also good, and some of their haberdashery is also good. However, in international markets, they're considered to be a low quality, not a high quality. They're not the lowest of the low, but they're not considered to be a high quality product. So when you are manufacturing, you should be making it better than Zara. not worse. But some things that Zara will definitely have, the quality of their dyes, they're not going to have things that lose color, because then everything gets returned and they can't sell. So Zara, for the price point it's in, is high quality within that price point. Now, labels. Labels we usually get made, so it depends where are you making them. And you definitely need to check beforehand. I haven't got a quick solution on where you get them from, but your label, particularly your brand label, that is your gold. So you need to try and find out where to get better labels, ask around, ask designers you know who have a good label, find out about it. On to garment construction. So fusing. Fusing is when you put the canvas or the thickener or the stiffener in a collar or on a facing. I'm sure some of you will have seen how it's ironed on. It can be bubbly, and that is a big no-no. So test the canvas first on a small piece of fabric. See what temperature your iron should be at. So when you fuse it, it is done well and it stays flat. And also just make sure you cut your fusing a little bit smaller than your collars and your cuffs and your facings, so you don't have it sticking out, and also so that it's not adding bulk to the seam. There's different kinds of fusing in different markets. There are different weights. This is overlocking the edge of the garment, the edge of the seam. A very, very simple way to improve your quality is to make sure you overlock it and that the color thread that's being used is the same as the main color of the fabric. I repeat, the thread color for the overlocker should be the same as the main color of the garment. Now, some of you will be taking your pieces to someone else to overlock. And when you do that, they've already got white on their overlock. And they're like, oh no, you can only have white. Please find somewhere else to go. You as designers cannot do that. It immediately devalues your product. So either buy the overlocker or find someone with an overlocking machine who's willing to change the thread color. And to be fair to that person, try to take a number of pieces in the same color. It doesn't matter about the style. A number of pieces in the same color fabric so that they don't have to thread, rethread, because it does take time, but it just must match. It's very important. So sometimes you can get, you have 3 thread overlockers, you have 4, you have 5, and so on. The 5 thread overlocker usually is used for stitching the side seam and so on of, say, a shirt in a factory. It makes it much faster because it's doing the side seam and the overlocking at the same time. But the overlocking, the seams are being overlocked together. Now, a lot of you, particularly in women's wear, are going to want to press the seam open, stitch it together, press it open so it lies flat. In that case, you have to overlock the piece first before you assemble it. So you overlock all the individual pieces and then you join them together. And I explained the 4 threads for knitwear. And then in terms of the tension, what I mean by tension is how tight is the thread being pulled on the machine. If it's too tight or too loose, you're going to have too much thread or it's going to bump the fabric. So just make sure that when they're doing the overlock, the fabric is lying flat. And then we go on to machine stitching. Okay, I don't know if I've got a picture. I don't know why I don't have pictures on this, sorry. So my whole life of sewing and stitching in Africa, and maybe it would have been the same in Europe, but I doubt it. The whole thing has been about tension. Now, tension I know that a lot of you will struggle with it. Some of you know what it is and some of you don't. So there's a dial on the sewing machine. And I really want you to go and look at it on YouTube or look at it on Google. It's called the tension dial. And the tension dial adjusts how quickly a thread is moving through your machine. So it can be tight or it can be loose. And when you alter it, you move the dial very, very slowly. You move it a little bit, you test. Another little bit, you test. So what happens? First of all, you may look at a garment and you may have joined two seams together, and one piece of fabric on the side seam is shorter than the other, but they were cut exactly the same. Or shall we say the back? Let's use the back. The back was cut the same, but when you stitch it, one is shorter than the other. And you see it's bumping on one side and the other side is flat. That is tension. It means the dial on your machine isn't adjusted properly for that fabric and thread. Let me repeat. The dial on your machine, the tension dial, is not adjusted correctly for the material you're using. It might be good for a lighter fabric or a heavier fabric, but it's wrong for the one you're using. Every fabric, you need to test a small piece, check the tension and adjust. So in my experience, when I wasn't looking, they would join the two backs together and then you get to the problem of at the bottom, one is shorter than the other. Hands up how many people know this solution. The tailor takes the scissors and just cuts the long side. I want a reaction. Give me a reaction. Is this true? You're joining the two backs together. One is longer than the other, even though you cut them the same. And the tailor takes the scissor and just cuts. And that's the solution. True or false? I don't know. Maybe I've lost you all. I'm not getting reactions, or your reactions are in the chat box. It is a pain. Some people say false. You are very lucky. Please bless your tailors and thank them for the great job. I'm very, very, very happy to hear that. So the real solution is you need to get the thing to unpick. You remove the stitching. You iron it flat again. And then you adjust the tension, stitch it again until they come the same length. To check the tension, they need to have a scrap of fabric. And if they're going to join two pieces together, they need two pieces joined together to be testing the tension on. So it's the same thickness. Now, other tailors will tell you, oh, don't worry about those wrinkles, I'll just iron it. It doesn't work. In a few cases, if it's wool or linen, you might be able to seam it a little bit, it would work. But polyester, polycotton, cotton, it does not work. And in any case, it's distorting your design. So if there's one thing you learn from this class, it's the importance of getting the tension right. It's the importance of maintaining your sewing machines so that the tension dial works. And if with all of that, it's still not working, maybe there's another problem with your sewing machine. Maybe the tension, maybe the thread I spoke to you about before. All of these things can make a problem on the tension, but don't allow that tension to be the trademark of your brand. It's not a good one, and it's certainly not high quality. I'm just going to check if there's any quick things. Okay, just true and false and whatever. Yeah, but if you pin the side seam to match and all the rest of that, that's fine. And if there's ease, that's fine. But if the machine tension is wrong, it will still mess up. And it's really good to know that people are actually taking the time to undo the stitching and then to finish it like that. Now, I don't have a lot of time left, but I have covered the most important things. Clipping excess fabric, that means you have to clip away things when you've stitched on the seam so they don't add bulkiness. Then, hand stitching. A lot of people don't like using a needle and thread, but sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's necessary before you do the machine stitching, and sometimes it's necessary to just do a little delicate edging of like finishing on the edge of a jacket or something like that. Remember, if we're talking high quality is labor intensive, and it means you need to be charging enough money to do all of these processes properly. Tomorrow, I have a class with you on costing and pricing. The two things go together. So just remember that it's important for you to decide which end of the market you want to be in. If you don't want to be doing hand finishing, you can do manufacturing like shirts for men, where you have lots of machinery and it's all mechanized and nothing is hand sewn. But if you're in wedding wear, evening wear, tailored wear for women and tailored wear for men, and needle and thread is essential. Types of hem. Blind hemming is a great way to put a hem. You can do it by hand or by machine, but it means you don't really see it. And then for the threads, this is really simple and very, very important. When you finish stitching, all the threads have to be cut off. So some of you will have a workshop where you don't have a finisher. Now, I have what I call a finisher, who takes the garments from all the tailors and turns them inside out and removes all of these threads, all of these little bits of things that have stuck to the garment before they now do the pressing. It's really important because if you see a garment on a rack and the threads hanging off it, the customer immediately thinks it's cheap. So on one hand, they negotiate with you on price, but on the second hand, they may decide not to buy it because they may think if the threads are hanging off, then probably it's not well made. And if it's not well made, why am I going to buy it? It's like the psychology of the customer. And lastly, we get on to ironing. So we have different things with ironing. You have the ironing you do when you're making the garment. And that ironing is opening the seams so that they lay flat. You have steaming you may do to make something fit something else. This is all normal, but you also have the ironing at the end of the garment. So here you iron the garment inside out. Before you do that, you need to know your fabric. If it's a polyester or a silk, it's a lower temperature iron. Cotton is higher. Wool is also low. Linen is higher. But please take a scrap of fabric, check it. If it starts smelling, it's too hot. If you see it shiny, and you often see that the tailor has put the iron on top of the seam, and you see a shiny bit that actually shows where the seam is. That is because the iron is too hot. So you can also sometimes use, if it's wool, you can take your iron, and you can actually press the steam above the seam and pat it with your hands. And that now allows you to do it without touching the garment. You can also use a cloth on top. You can use a damp cloth, so there's a bit of moisture, or you can use a dry cloth if the fabric is very delicate. Some people even use paper. So first of all, you iron the garment inside out. You turn it around the other way. You make sure it's been pressed properly. All the seams are open and so on. And then afterwards, you turn it back the other way, and then you're able to press it. Now, why you do that is because if you press it directly without opening the seams, you may find some of the fabric has somehow pleated a bit, and that may make the garment look bad, or it may make it look smaller. Okay, there's some very loud noise in my background. Sorry about that. So lastly, you go to the final pressing on the exterior. Start with the small parts first, the sleeves, the collars, things like that. And then you iron the big part of the garment. Sorry, why you do that is because if you iron the whole big part of the garment, and then afterwards you have to now do the small bits, there's a chance that they're going to get spoiled. And whatever you have already ironed is now going to need to be ironed again. So always the small bits followed by the big bits. And I think that is everything I had to tell you. My last slide, which I'm not sharing, is like the end is the beginning. Because now with what I've told you about, I want you to go back and look, start with your best seller, pick out whatever you sell a lot of, and just make a note of how could you bring the level even higher. Maybe you're already at the top. Congratulations. I'm really very, very happy because I know how much work that is. But if you're not, just take a critical eye, go through what I've discussed, bit by bit, and see what you can do to improve it. And then tomorrow, I'll just check if there's anything in the chat box, but tomorrow we're going to now look at the costing and pricing. Because the costing and pricing goes with the quality. The two go totally together. It's mentioned that I didn't talk about packaging. I haven't really got much more to say on packaging, except that the same principles apply. So when you now package your product, if you're making a bag, for example, to put your thing in, or a box, how are you going to fold your garment so that it goes inside it? Is the bag the right size for you to comfortably fold the bag, the garment, so it fits in neatly without bending everywhere? Now, it's normal that you would have packaging different sizes for different products. But seeing as it's become such an important part of sales that you package correctly, it's worth spending the time with your prototypes, looking at how you want to fold it, then looking at, because it has to be standardized, then looking at what size you need of bag to put it in so that it sits flat. And in relation to that and quality control, I have a manufacturer friend with his own brand. He tells the factory they're not allowed to pack the clothes when he's not around, because invariably someone forgets something. And we must remember that packaging is a very new phenomenon in Africa. It's a very new phenomenon for our tailors and our finishers. They don't always understand the value of the package. And so they're very likely to think this doesn't really matter much. Let me just do it like this. But you who are looking after the high quality manufacturing of your brand and your brand name, you know that packaging now is everything. Markets have changed. The package has to seduce the customer into buying the product. It's what makes the gift exciting to open. And if it's now done, again, inconsistently, this time it's like this, that time it's like that, it's a no-no. It just doesn't work. So I'm talking to you as I'm talking to myself. These are things that constantly within our business we have to work on to get them better. And thank you very much, Rwenda, for raising that I hadn't brought this up, because it is a really essential part of the whole high quality. So, thank you all very much. I think this is the last minute. I really appreciated your comments and questions, and I'll hand over to Omla Baki if there's something she would like to wind up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marguerite. I'm sure that everyone in this session gained something very insightful. I can see that the comment section is buzzing with all manner of comments and appreciation, saying thank you for the fantastic delivery of today's session. Please catch up with Anne-Marguerite again tomorrow for another session. Remember that I already posted in the WhatsApp group that we are having 3 sessions this week. And tomorrow we are having another session on revenue and price models. And of course, yours truly, and Marquette is going to be facilitating that session. So I advise that you come with your questions and please dial in time so that you'll have ample time for discussions and ample time for questions. I can assure you that it's also going to be an awesome time again tomorrow. Please, if your device is wrongly named, I see an iPhone, and unfortunately, this iPhone user has been commenting all the while. Please ensure that you rename your device. If you are the iPhone user and you cannot rename your device, please kindly reach out to us at Fashionomics Help Desk at CC Hub.Africa after this call to regularize your attendance so that you don't totally miss out of today's attendance and previous attendance. Oh, and Marquette, I guess you want to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to everyone, for tomorrow's class, what would help is if you get this bestseller and you think about all the inputs that go into that bestseller. Because tomorrow we're going to be doing this costing and pricing, and we'll start with costing. So we just need you to have in mind and in detail one piece, so you'll get more. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. So that's an assignment for you tomorrow in preparation for tomorrow's class. Once again, if you are not on the WhatsApp group, please kindly let us know so that we can add you on the WhatsApp group. Please let us know if you're not on the WhatsApp group. Just let us know, drop in the chat box and we'll share with you the link for you to join the WhatsApp group immediately after this session, or just right on this call. My colleague will share, Wanjiku, my colleague will share the links to join the WhatsApp group. For you, those having issues accessing the Moodle platform, please send us an email on Fashionomics Help Desk at cchub.africa, and we'll be more than happy to attend to your request. For those of you who are having issues on the Moodle platform, please send an email to Fashionomics Help Desk at cchub.africa, and we'll be more than happy to attend to you. My colleague is going to post, Wanjiku, please kindly post the email in the chat box for those who are having issues on Moodle, please. Thank you very much. Okay, I can see that the link is already in the chat box. Please, if you are not on the WhatsApp group, please kindly use the link to join the WhatsApp group. That's where we're going to be passing out relevant information pertaining to this program. So we are going to call it a day from here, and we are going to be catching up on the WhatsApp group. Please come one, come all to the WhatsApp group to come and share your key learnings. And if you have any questions, or if there are any pending questions, peradventure you ask the question in the course of the session and Marquette will not attend to them, please kindly send your questions to Fashionomics Help Desk at cchub.africa. Please remember to title the subject of whatever email you are sending to us correctly so that we can attend to you as soon as we get to see them. Thank you very much. Okay, if you have any questions, please drop in the chat box. Please drop in the chat box. Okay, in the absence of none, thank you very much. Okay, Belinda, the videos will be posted, we'll have the videos uploaded on the Moodle platform very soon. Please bear with us for the slight delay, the unprecedented delay on our part. But before the end of this week, we'll have few other sessions, previous sessions posted on the Moodle platform, uploaded on the Moodle platform rather. Thank you very much, everyone. Do have an amazing day, and we'll catch up again in the WhatsApp group and again tomorrow. Bye for now and have an amazing day. Thank you. Bye.